All right, you can hear me. Okay, you guys didn't sit in the right place, but it's fine. I think you're quite recognizable. Okay, I think this will be a fun panel because there is a lot of things to say about Cosmos in general, about building on a blockchain. I haven't sent you over any questions, so this will be even better because you'll discover them at the same time. All right, just before talking about Cosmos, let's talk about making a choice of building your dApp on the blockchain. I think one of the things to consider are things like community adoption, users, TVL, whatever. So what other factors did you consider before launching on Cosmos, and what are the things that you have in general to consider before launching your own project on a blockchain?
So we both have a platform, and now we have an app we're building. We originally actually started out connected with Polkadot. So we looked at other things. This was all pre-Celestia, pre-rollups, pre all that sort of stuff. But it wasn't working out for us, and we met the Cosmos team, or I mean not the Cosmos team, but sort of a bunch of the Cosmos community, and partly values aligned, partly technology aligned, right? The idea of self-sovereign system that cooperates with other systems in a useful and productive way. It's like, yeah, that's what an economy is. A mall is one where you get, you're sitting in controlled real estate and you're paying a tithe and they're providing all the security and all that sort of stuff. An economy is much bigger than that, and so the whole Cosmos ethos fundamentally was much more aligned with the idea of an economy, much more aligned with you're a business that has an idea that you're going to take to market that can cooperate and exist with these other things, and so that was great. Add to that, simple requirements of the technology stack that, at least at the time, Cosmos was unique in, which is fast finality, right? Fast finality, durable state, high performance, all those things were essential.
Okay.
So that was quite a while ago, and people have been inspired and carrying this forward, and so that tech advantages have spread, and so one could go, well, okay, should I move to Celestia? Should we use one of these other tech things? Do we use Hyperlane? Do we all these stuff? But fundamentally, that core values and the core technology advantages are still relevant here.
Okay.
Yeah. So Lumera previously was, passed on network, built off a fork of the Zcash, UTXO-based, slower block times, all of that. And when we made the decision to transfer, our project onto the Cosmos ecosystem, I think first and foremost, one of the most important things is their focus on interoperability. Obviously, the sovereignty aspect and our customizability and all of that is great, but immediately when you're building an L1 on Cosmos, your own chain on Cosmos, you can have immediate connectivity to all the other chains on Cosmos, through the IBC relayer. And I think that, solves a lot of the fragmentation issues that can exist on, other ecosystems and things like that. And so, yeah, I think for us, the direction that Cosmos, has been moving in is something that really aligns with our philosophy of interoperability, regardless of whatever ecosystem you're building on, you can find some sort of connectivity towards. So yeah, that's for us.
Yeah, for us, our team participated in the Cosmos ICO, and so starting to build on Cosmos was kind of a no-brainer. But also Polli, I would say maybe a bit unlike the other project here, is a B2B product. And so the interop and the ability to do cross-chain was key for us, and it still is. And as we expand into other networks, like we're building into Solana right now, and we're building EVM connectivity, having the interoperability built in from the base layer has made everything much easier.
Yeah, I think you're making a great transition here, because that's the question I really wanted to get on after that. Because when you look at the previous cycle that we had, in the previous cycle we had a bunch of blockchains, we had a bunch of people just downloading a new wallet every week, going on a new chain. But this has kind of changed since. When you're looking for the past 4 or 5 years outside of the EVM ecosystem and on Solana, the non-EVM chains have gain little to no adoption today. And so the thing is, today you guys are still building on Cosmos, which is a non-EVM chain. So my question is, what are the challenges of doing so? And because you're going multi-chain, so you're expanding to other chains, I guess, was it an obvious choice because you saw that there was a lack of adoption or a lack of users? Or was it something else that made you switch to a multi-chain solution?
First of all, I'd say that like technology is developed and brought to market in Cosmos, and then everyone else follows suit a few years later. I think the interoperability is inevitable. If you kind of mentioned the last cycle, but actually the last few cycles have been retail focused. And I think that the cycle we're either in right now or that's about to start, I don't know, I think the four-year cycle might be disrupted, but the future is definitely institution. And institutions care about completely different things than retail. They care about retaining as much of the value that their brand, their business brings, and they need to be able to communicate with other businesses. So for this use case, I think Cosmos is a no-brainer for this type of, for these industries, right, for these businesses. And we will see the Solana ecosystem, the EVM ecosystems, the Move ecosystems, and so on, adopt much of the technology and interoperability that Cosmos already has built into its framework. Polli mainly works with foundations and now kind of growing into treasuries and DATs. So for us, looking at the kind of entire blockchain space, entire crypto space, and how we can serve potentially everyone was our guiding kind of Northern Star from the beginning.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said is actually like really critical. I think at the end of the day, end users, they don't want to think too much about like, oh, how to get like from one token to another. They just want to press a button and then everything kind of just happens on the back end. And I think, you know, as more and more, I guess, projects are interconnected, especially with, you know, how Cosmos is also, you know, focusing on the EVM aspect, and then I would assume most likely the Solana being next, I think all these like kind of major ecosystems all kind of connect all together, and in such a seamless way, I think a lot of people will then come to see like, okay, there is this really interesting ecosystem that's been building on Cosmos. Let me go check it out. And then more and more, I think users will eventually flow over from these other alternative ecosystems as well.
So you would say Cosmos will see more users coming in the coming years because of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think ultimately, you know, as there is that connectivity and, you know, assets can be bridged from other ecosystems towards Cosmos, I think, yeah, there will be a much larger adoption overall.
I'd like to untangle some things in your question, because there's Cosmos, the tech stack,
Yep.
and development ecosystem, not developer ecosystem, right? Where, you know, which includes, you know, say, Injective, Tempo, DYDX, you know, just huge numbers of things, where a lot of the ability to build the stuff we build, you know, so there's Cosmos, the tech stack, or the tech environment. There is Cosmos, the community of crypto users, which needs a different name because they really are not related. And so a lot of people get, you know, are unhappy about Cosmos as a ecosystem of users, which I think is a mistaken view of the world, right? There are Web3 users. The only way any of this matters is if the users are just using software and it happens to be Cosmos stuff, right? Not they are users inside the Cosmos ecosystem. And so the power of the technology stuff that we've got and that we share and that we can help each other with lets us go out to Web3 users, not to Cosmos users, right? And so I think it's important to separate those. We did not come to Cosmos because it had a huge user base, because it didn't have a huge, you know, trader user base at the time, and it doesn't now. but from it, we can build this thing that lets us orchestrate the activity on these EVM chains and move, provide a user experience that easily moves money from, Aave on Base to, to eventually have something on Hyperliquid, right? And users don't care that those are Cosmos chains or not Cosmos chains. And then the other side is EVM versus not. Yes, Cosmos Core is not EVM. Cosmos Core is not a virtual machine environment at all, right? The Cosmos stack does not allow you to run two different applications from two different people that are PvP with each other in the same environment. Cosmwasm added some of that. Agoric added a VM like that, and people have added an EVM version of that. But that's different from the core engine that lets me run my thing safely and protect my users from each other, but not from taking some random Joe's contract and protecting myself from that. So that's two different levels of ambition. Cosmos lets you opt into that, and that's great. But again, that's sort of one of those elements you may or may not use, and some things use and some things don't. So those are sort of these three different things, and it's easy to entangle them. It's important, I think, as people think about what other people in the space are doing or what their priorities are, that those are very different. And they're all valuable, they're all important, and we're different ways along on these different pieces.
Yeah, but as we are talking about lessons learned from building on Cosmos, I think one of the things you mentioned, it's the tech that Cosmos has provided to multiple protocols, multiple projects, and when you look at BNB chain, Chronos, whatever, some of the tech stack still is either Tendermint or part of the Cosmos stack.
That's right.
However, what we've seen throughout the years, it's that most of the value that Cosmos has created has never flown back into its ecosystem. And it's kind of been used for free by everyone, and everyone is like, yeah, the tech is so good, the stack is so good, but Cosmos itself didn't really gain much out of it. So do you think it's something that could...
Who's Cosmos here? Atom didn't gain much out of it?
Yeah.
ICF didn't gain much out of it? Or, the people who were investors in the Cosmos space that also invested in the DYDX rollout or in Injective or, any of these things that seem like they're now out there, but they participated in it.
I would say if you look at the number of users, the TVL, et cetera, that you have on the other chains that use the Cosmos stack, none of this has flown back to Cosmos, so it can be stakers, it can be the ecosystem, it can be new users that come in to Cosmos because they think that, well, because this tech is so good and we've used it on the other chain, then the origin of it must be even better. So I guess this was one of the things that people have kind of argued over and over and over, again and again and again, over the past couple of years. And it's about the value that actually goes to Cosmos. How do you perceive the value that today is arguably little or none, even?
Welcome to open source. I mean, I've been doing open source for decades and get some value from it for my use, and get other people contributing to make it better for my use, but I certainly capture very little of the value that they then apply it to. So, that's sort of the nature of open source, for starters, right? And a lot of the value that has happened is people take this and they go do something, they execute, they solve some user problem, and they get outsized return from having solved that user problem. Feel good for them. That was one of us, as opposed to jealous that they managed to execute on a user thing. I mean, I realize that there's a tension there of, from a business and investment point of view, you want some of the return to come in, and some of it has, and we can continue to figure out how to make that worthy and happen, right? But some of that has to be by applying this technology in a way that is of use. I was thinking about this panel before. So where would Agoric benefit from, the project I'm doing, benefit from the work that ICAF has done in the last couple of years, right? So far, not a lot, right? But if IBC Eureka was deployed proxying where it could do GMP, we'd be all over that. And we'd be paying fees, and we'd be paying fees in Atom, right? That would be taking that technology that we built the last mile into here's a usable service that people can pay for. Would it capture a significant amount of value? I don't know. That's a business question that ICF would have to figure out. But that's an example of something where take that technology, get it to the last step of solving the problem that someone else has that they can incorporate, where you're providing ongoing value as opposed to that initial that initial value. I mean, there's huge value in the technology stuff. Capturing that has always been a challenge of technology, right?
You guys want to add anything?
I mean, I think, you said a lot of good points. I think ultimately, as the whole ecosystem just grows, I think naturally as more and more transactions are happening and then, tokens are being relayed from one network to another, I think that is maybe the best way at this moment, where I think, Atom can gain more and more value in that way. I think maybe there could be something that, I think what you were saying about institutionals, utilizing this technology, I think maybe as more and more institutions on board and then their communications within these different, companies towards each other, that will also drive a lot of the value back to, I guess, the Atom token itself, using the relayers, the hub, and all of that.
Building on that enterprise thing, right? That's an example where, that great talk a couple days ago on what ICF is doing and why the enterprise is important and why the adoption is important and how well poised the Atom stack is to win there. What they have not talked about yet is, so why is that good for other projects that are using the stack, right? And there's plenty of opportunity for, once there is that pathway, if your project is doing this class of stuff, that can be part of an overall offering, right? It's not, ICF built this thing and now that's what enterprise need. Enterprises need full solutions that are usually larger than the core offering. There are plenty of, opportunities for the service that Polli brings to be of value to the stuff that enterprises will deploy from the ICF thing, where they could bring them in as a partner in the sales process, right? That when you go to, to conferences, you might see a Oracle network booth, and it has in it 20 projects from other unrelated companies that are supporting that ecosystem that add value in a business sense, so that it's a complete solution offering to businesses, which is what businesses want. And so that's something where, we need to build out that piece so that all of the community of developers we invite to get excited about the technology can entrepreneurially build something that then has a sales path that aligns with the rest of the Atom, with the rest of the business and Atom process out to generate value. I mean, I think that as a community, we really need to be, we need people to be proud of having applied Cosmos technology, as opposed to, not sharing that very much because then you'll think I don't know that users are the important thing, right? And, we've got amazing tech. We want to line that up so that we have reason to go into the same customers and give users more value, and all of us win from that.
Okay.
I'll also say that I think that there's a very big difference between in the beginning, Atom's kind of financial planning for itself wasn't great. Still isn't.
I think we all agree here.
still isn't great, but it's going through changes. I think with the new leadership now, there is much to look forward to. And that means that there are growing pains, and kind of like a tree shedding its leaves to make room for new leaves to grow. It might not be a beautiful process, but it's something that's happening. It will take time. Separating that from the, volatile nature of, or vicious nature of crypto Twitter, specifically towards the community, I think is important. It's really easy to kind of like FUD and be a keyboard warrior. It's much harder to build and create value. And I think, as Dean was saying, like, be proud in the teams next to you. Share in supporting them in their successes, and don't only look to like, how is this success supporting my bag? Like, you want your bag to grow, build. Build value, solve an actual problem. Don't just expect that, oh, it's crypto, so number go up. Like, we're in a new phase. Like, we're 16 years into into this journey. It's not long. That's a really short span of time if you look at like technology adoption and technology growth. And I think we're entering into a new phase where maybe 10% of the value will come from retail, even though 90% of the noise will come from retail. But 90% of the value is going to come from external businesses integrating into the ecosystem and bringing in a lot of the value they've been creating for 1, 2, 3, 4 decades into these ecosystems. And if Cosmos, Cosmos is poised to support these businesses, these enterprises coming in, I think there's a path that leads to some of that value accruing into the ecosystem, whether that's into Atom, or into Agoric, or into Lumera, or into Polli, or into any other chain that's here, that's building, that's kind of supporting the ecosystem, the ecosystems.
Yeah, and I think there is one thing that I wanted to ask you guys, because you have all been building on Cosmos, in the Cosmos ecosystem. And what do you think the role of the foundation, so in this case ICF, should be to bring new apps to life, to do and bring more enterprises to the chain? What should the role of the foundation be, and did you guys get any support while building your solution? Just gives us some more insights maybe on what building on Cosmos means and what type of interactions you guys had with the foundation. And if you didn't have any, what do you think the foundation should be doing to improve its ecosystem?
I'm happy to start. I would say, and this is kind of like a message to all foundations, first of all, don't get in the way. Like, if there's too much politics, if there's too much ego, like solve that at home and like then look out into the community. We specifically work with foundations. And so in many times, and this is not just looking at like ICF or Cosmos specifically, like we're in touch with a number of foundations. And so this isn't just a problem, this also isn't just a problem for foundations or a problem for Web3, this is the human problem. And so first of all, like solve that. Second, how can you support teams that solve a problem, create value, rather than support teams that make a lot of noise and maybe make you look good in the short term.
When you're saying support, does it mean financial support or some other type of support?
Depending on the use case. Doesn't have to be financial.
Okay.
There could be many ways to support, like giving out a grant or money isn't always necessarily the best way to support a team. Like maybe it's supporting their development effort. Maybe it's like creating a microcosm for a pilot to like test out the product.
Right. Currently, you know, as they're moving into getting banks to the table, getting businesses to the table, if you're a chain, startup, you know, application, service, whatever it is, that would be of value to that, you know, arrange the structure, so the foundation should arrange the structure if they're getting the deal flow to bring these smaller projects to the table so that they're getting business opportunities, right? You know, ironically, fewer users in the Cosmos, you know, finance, you know, ecosystem might actually be a win because you get less PvP, or it's more obvious that PvP over those users is dumb. Right, you know, and that our goal should be, you know, the goal of this should be to go out to the mainstream and get users there, and that's a thing that the aggregate market power of an ICF to go get those and bring them to a table so that it's easy for projects in Cosmos to step up and talk to them, you know, would be something that one can imagine doing. That one, you know, and they're now in a position where they've got that deal flow. How do they turn that into something where it's an opportunity for other projects to also win, as opposed to, you know, just sort of the core tech stack via ICL? And I'm not saying they're not doing that, right? But I'm saying that's a thing to look for, is getting more projects to more of the table, and make sure it's not PvP.
Yeah, if I'll double click on that and like give a specific example. If you're, for example, the ICF, you're focused less on building, you're focused more on BD, you have it much easier to communicate directly with key decision makers at enterprises and other businesses. If you're a small startup, you're focused on building. BD support, access to market support, could be tenfold more valuable than any grant check you might give a team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, you know, being like a newer project on Cosmos, I know like there's more restrictions and things like that when it comes to like their help with marketing and whatnot. But I think, you know, having a spotlight and showcasing new like projects, chains that are building on Cosmos would be extremely helpful. Getting the word out there, having that visibility, enabling other builders to be like, oh, what are these guys building? Let me go check it out. And they can come take a look and they're like, oh, wow, they have this like amazing tech that they're building. I can actually start integrating this into whatever I'm building. And so I think in that case, that would actually help a lot of projects gain more visibility, gain more traction, and really get the word out there in that way. But yeah, I think in the BD aspect, like providing introductions, things like that, that always helps, you know, significantly.
Yeah, I would add one more thing, and then we would be done with this panel. But I think one of the things that foundations tend to overlook is their sustainability, because they are essentially sitting on a huge treasury. They can spend however they want, and most of the time they just get lost in it. And it's one of the things that has been multiple times argued over at Ethereum Foundation, that sells Ethereum instead of using DeFi, etc. And we are actually seeing some changes there this year because they are deploying ETH, they are borrowing against ETH on decentralized platforms, therefore supporting their own ecosystem and therefore using their ETH instead of selling it. And basically you also earn interest and you earn more money, and it gets you more runway, it gets you more funding to give out to projects, it gives you more opportunities to hire people. And I think most of the foundations that are sitting on a huge bag of tokens, most of the time should think about, okay, how can I get more money flowing in a way that I don't have to sell a token to fund my operations, or I don't have to give out my token for free to anyone for them to sell it instead. And think more about, okay, which types of businesses can we deploy, or how can we actually bring more money in order to, first of all, sustain our ecosystem, deploy more funds across the ecosystem, and then at the same time, think about a longer term and saying, hey, yeah, we have this war chest, but we're actually thinking about the future and being more proactive in this way. I think it should be something that all the foundations are doing. And I think as a chain, especially one which was launched in the ICO era, I would say, most of the foundations have huge treasuries and don't think about the long term. You can talk about Algorand, Tezos, Stellar, XRP. It's crazy to see how much money is sitting idle within these foundations that is just getting spent every year. And we've seen that with Polkadot, which had a few, I don't remember the number, but I think it was like they paid $400K to CoinGecko to get their logo animated. So it was like, they don't even know what to do with this money. And I think this is something that foundations should also focus on for a longer term.
Animators need to get paid also, man. I think you said, the key thing you said is sustainable.
Yeah.
In the era of, it's not, we can't rely on number go up. Foundations, projects, everyone needs sustainable business models. That only comes when you solve a problem for real users.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only way. And I think that, at least what I've heard over the last like 3 days, especially from the CL's leadership, is they definitely have their head like screwed on in the right direction, looking exactly to solve those problems.
Perfect. I think it's a wholesome conclusion, and we can end it here. So please give it up for the speakers. And yeah.